In short, this is the story of the Dukes, a well-known espionage group flying under the radar for many years while still compromising our value organizations. So this is Matthieu, I'm Thomas, we are both malware researchers at ESET, and today our agenda is first we are going to give some background about the Dukes. So who are they? And then we'll present this new campaign, Operation Ghost, and the new malware families we discovered, and finally some takeaways. So the Dukes is an espionage group active for more than 10 years. As you might know, it's frequent that different researchers or security companies use different names for the similar group. So the Dukes are also known as APT29, Ethereum, or Cozy Bear. And in this presentation, we will use the Dukes. So, this document by US government describes how the Dukes were operating inside the DNC network. It also states that they first breached the DNC in summer 2015. And it is important to note that the Dukes intrusion preceded SEDNIT or APT28 intrusion. The Dukes operate for a very long time. This document from F-Secure shows that they were already targeting high-value organizations in 2009. For instance, the government of Georgia, Turkey, and Uganda were targeted. They were also targeting Western organizations such as NATO. The Dukes have shown that they can go after very important targets. The CNBC article explained that the Pentagon, the US military headquarters, was partially compromised by the group. The last official attribution of the cyber attack to the Duke is from February 2017, and the Norway security services said that several ministries, including the Foreign and the Defense Ministry, were targeted by the Dukes. The Dukes mainly target three different verticals: diplomats like embassy or diplomatic missions, military organizations, and political organizations such as think tank and political parties. And to our best of our knowledge, they only conduct spying operation, and they are not involved in cyber sabotage. So all we described so far were our operation before 2017. But what happened after the last known attack? So basically, they went dark. For such group, it's quite rare to not hear about them for so long, and there are several possibilities here. For example, they totally stopped their activities, or they modified their modus operandi to avoid public scrutiny. However, in November 2018, friends from FireEye wrote an article about a campaign targeting different industries where some elements from the attack were linked to an old Duke campaigns in 2016. But after all the facts, the question, is it linked to the Dukes, remain without clear answer.
So now let's talk about Operation Ghost, which are our latest findings. So in short, Operation Ghost is an operation linked to the Dukes, and the time of activity started in 2013, around 2013, and it was still active in June 2019. So June 2019 is what we saw in ESET telemetry, but it's possible that they are still active, but we don't have visibility on those campaigns. Also, they use known techniques, such as techniques they were using before, such as using Twitter or relying on steganography to hide the CNC traffic. But they developed totally new tools, which have no source code share with previous tools. So how this research started? We were just digging into our telemetry, and we found some interesting samples. So around 18 months ago, on the same machines, we found 3 different interesting pieces of malware. We named Polyglot Duke, Red Duke, and Fat Duke. But at that time, we didn't know which group was operating those malware. And also, we didn't know they were actually linked. But one day, we were able to connect the dots. Actually, a malware operator thought it was a good idea to use a malware known in 2013. So we observed a nearly full infection chain. So first, we were able to make a link between all these malware families. And secondly, as I said, as second stage implant, they use a malware called as Mini-Duke. And Mini-Duke is a malware that was first described by Kaspersky in 2013. And here, this is a blog post published on our blog, We Live Security, that describes Mini-Duke, and it was published in 2014. So it shows you that this malware was described by many different researchers, and it's really nothing new. So that day, we realized that the Dukes actually never left. So the target for this campaign, a small disclaimer, all this research is based on ESET own telemetry. So we have a very partial view on the campaign, and we guess there are many more targets and many more victims. So we identified 2 ministries of foreign affairs in Eastern Europe, 1 ministry of foreign affairs in a European Union country, and the embassy in Washington, D.C. of that European Union country. So I guess CYBERWARCON is the right place to talk about that. So the timeline, as I said, the first public report about the malware linked to the Dukes was published in February 2013. It was a report about Mini-Duke, and at that time it was not known that the Dukes were a bigger malware platform and that Mini-Duke was not just a small independent piece of malware. Then the oldest element linked to Operation Ghost is a compilation timestamp for Polyglot Duke, one of the first stage malware, and it was compiled in September 2013. Then in September 2016, we have the first deployment in the wild of their new third stage malware we call Fat Duke. And finally, in 2017, was the first deployment of Red Duke, one of their other first stage malware. So basically, it shows you that during all these years when there were no public report about the Duke, they were still working and still developing new tools. Finally, around 1 year ago, this is the time when they registered their last Twitter accounts. So these Twitter accounts are used with Polyglot Duke and kind of CNC server. So they store the CNC URL on Twitter. Thomas will talk about it a bit after. And finally, the last activity we were able to see was in June of this year, and it was the deployment of a Fat Duke malware. So now I'll let Thomas present the different stages of the attack.
So in this campaign, typical compromise is divided in 4 consecutive steps. We were not able to identify the initial compromise vector. However, we believe it was either way a phishing email or the reuse of stolen credential gathered during all the campaigns. So the main first stage we call Polyglot Duke. It will connect to an online service such as Twitter, Imgur, or Reddit. And as example, in this post on Reddit created by the Duke operators, as you can see here, there is this strange thing in the message. Polyglot Duke will decode it, and it is used as the URL for the command and control server. So this is another message, this time on Twitter. that once again, it will decode the string and give another different like CNC URL. So back to our big picture, Polyglot Dukes connect to the CNC server. It has very limited functions. It can download and start additional executables, and it's not a full-feature backdoor. In order to blend into the network traffic, the executable is encrypted and embedded into a picture. The first stage is called RegDuke. It uses Dropbox as a command and control server, and the payload are again in pictures. But this time, it uses steganography in order to keep the image valid. So RegDuke is written in .NET, and it's a loader. The payload is stored on the disk, and it's encrypted. The key and the initial vector are either way hard-coded or stored in the registry. And finally, the payload receives commands using Dropbox service. So we said that the first stage are downloading images, right? But how they are using it? So this is the picture they used. They modify it to insert data by using steganography. So each pixel has 3 colors value, red, green, and blue, right? And they are in the range from 0 to 255, which can be represented on 8 bits as shown in the picture. So they use 2 or 3 least significant bits to store data. So if we do the math here, for every pixel, they are able to store 2 plus 3 plus 3, which is like 8 bits, which is 1 byte of data. So when they decode the image, they read every pixel and reconstruct the hidden data. So for this specific pixel, by joining the 8 bits, we have the value 145. So on the left is the tone of blue of value 255, which is the maximum value, and on the right, a blue tone of value 248, which is the worst possible value when the 3 least significant bits are used to store information. So as you can see, it's very hard to make the difference, right? Thus, if we apply it to every pixel, the resulting image will be visually equivalent. So this is, on the left, this is the original image, and on the right, it's like the modified image. And as you can see, you can see a bit on the water, on the sky, like the small pixelized bits, but other than that, it's quite similar. So once the data embedded is in the picture is extracted, the stage 1 drops and executes the file, and the second stage is mini-duke. So it's a malware we mentioned earlier. It's a simple piece of malware that implements basic spying functions, and it also uses a picture to communicate with the CNC server. So mini-duke is known since at least 2013, and in comparison to earlier variant, the recent sample we analyzed were more obfuscated. However, their behavior was similar. So for example, this is an example of the registry key they use. On the top, it's like the one from 2014, and on the bottom is like the more recent one. And as you can see, like they are using the same registry key. Yeah.
So now let's talk about FatDuke, which is the most complex piece of malware they use in this campaign. So in comparison to the other malware they use, it is really more obfuscated. So they use a lot of junk code. They had and also junk strings, like string from Google Chrome. And they also use opaque predicates. So when you decompile the code in IDA, it's really hard to follow because there are a lot of call to functions that are really useless. And actually, the binaries are very big. One of them was even at like 16 megabytes, and that's why we call this malware Fat Duke. One interesting feature is it can communicate with other machines on the local network using name pipes. So for example, if one machine is not connecting to the internet, they can use another machine on the same network to forward commands to this infected but not connected to the internet machine. Also, they use a hard-coded base64 config that is stored in the resource sections. That means that they cannot update it, and every time they want to update the config, they need to redrop a new malware. So this is an example of a config. There are a few interesting fields, such as some credentials used to contact the other machine, the local network. So as this config is hard-coded, they first need to extract those credentials from the interesting machine and then build a sample and then drop it. So this is the CNC server domain. And these are the PHP scripts that are used on this CNC domain. In that example is not that clear, but for other one, it's clear that they use a name of scripts that are related to the name of the domain. For example, one of them was some medical clinic or something, and they use scripts such as doctors.php or things like that. Finally, they are also interested in some cookies related to Google services. We are not sure what they are doing with that, but they collect them and send it to the CNC server. And finally, they can also specify some activity window. So for example, the backdoor will only work during the week. So these are the CNC servers. And one interesting thing is that when you go on the index of this CNC server, it will redirect you to a similar domain that is legitimate. So we guess that these domains are owned by the operator, and they are trying to redirect to a legitimate domain so that people, when they check the server, they will think it's like a legitimate server. So the network communication. So first, it will do a GET request to one of the PHP scripts that I show in the config. Then the server will reply with a HTML page that is actually cloned from a legit website. So this is one example, and this time they clone some, I think it's the index page of the BBC, and they actually modify it to add image tag. You can see I highlighted it. So the malware will parse this HTML page, extract the link to the image, download the image. So this is not really a valid picture. They just prepend a BMP header to a blob of encrypted data. Finally, they decrypt it, and we can see the commands. So the commands are in JSON. And for example, the first one, they execute net.exe. The second one, they execute schtask.exe. So from the beginning, we are saying that this is a new campaign run by the Dukes, but actually, how can we be sure that this is really the Dukes? So first, they reuse a previously known and custom malware, Miniduke. To our knowledge, this malware is not used by any other group. Secondly, we found additional code similarity. So on the left, this is a piece of code from OnionDuke, which is a malware that was discovered around 2014 or 15. I don't remember exactly. On the right, and this is this piece of code is from a malware whose hash is in one of the public reports. On the right, this is a piece of code we found in Polyglot Duke. As you can see, these pieces of code are really similar. They are used to decrypt strings. So it means that Polyglot Duke, also we didn't find this piece of code in any other malware not related to the Dukes. So it means that Polyglot Duke developer had somehow access to Onion Duke source code. And actually, it might even be the contrary, because in the S run, you can see there is this X value, which is actually the compilation timestamp of the malware. So this one was compiled in November 2013. And this polyglot sample was compiled in September 2013. So apparently, Polyglot Duke is even older than Onion Duke, but somehow went under the radar for all these years. They also reuse some similar techniques, such as using Twitter to store the CNC address, or using steganography to blend into the network traffic. And finally, they targeted similar organizations. On the 3 victims we identified, 2 of them were previously compromised by the Dukes in 2015. So we are pretty sure that this campaign was actually run by the Dukes. And why they were successful and why they were able to fly under the radar for like 3 or 4 years. First, they developed new tools. I said that they reuse Miniduke, but it's actually one of the mistakes. But on the other hand, they redeveloped totally new tools like RegDuke or FatDuke. For FatDuke, we didn't find any code similarity with older malware. They also use stealthy communication channels, such as using Twitter, mainly using steganography, also using HTML pages and downloading picture, which is, if you look at a PCAP, it's something that is not really suspicious. And finally, we think that they use unique network resources per target. So at least in the victims we check, all the CNC servers were different for each victim. So it means that if one victim is able to identify one CNC server and share it with its partner or the community, other victims won't be able to find if they are compromised or not. So some conclusion. The last activity we saw related to that campaign was in June 2019. But maybe it's because they stopped their activities, or maybe it's just because we don't have visibility on computers where they're still active. Also, next year is the US presidential election. You know that they targeted the last presidential election, so we can guess that they will try to again hack into one of the 2 political parties. So we'll see next year or what finally happened. So in conclusion, it's not because you don't see public reports about a group, it doesn't mean that this group actually disappeared and has stopped its activities. So for the Dukes, they were active as before doing all this year, even if nobody was talking about them. And we'll continue to track the Dukes and make subsequent public reporting if we find additional interesting activity. Finally, we would like to thank our colleague, Matthieu for his help during this research. You can find our full report on our blog, We Live Security. Thanks for your attention. Please ask questions.
Hi, Nick Carr from Faou. Actually, I was just curious. There was a really distinctive coding style to Miniduke, mostly like borrowing stuff from 29A and a lot of inline assembly. Did you see a similar development strategy for Polyglot Duke and Ratchet Duke? And I'm asking because, I mean, at least the entire row here, none of us have samples for Fat Duke, Reg Duke, or Polyglot Duke other than what you kindly shared. But given the diversity of developers that seem to work on the 8 or so Dukes that have been seen so far, do you see a similar coding style, or are we just talking entirely different development?
No, in comparison to Miniduke, it's very different, but I guess it's more related to all this Onion Duke cluster than to Miniduke. I don't know why Miniduke is there, honestly. But all those malware was developed in C or C++, not in assembly. But in the report, we talk about another malware we call Duke that was used in 2015 but not reported, and that was also developed in assembly. But for this new, like the ones that were used this year, no, it was really different coding style.
Hey, thanks, guys. For your slide about OPSEC redirecting the C2 landing page to the legit websites,
Yes.
can you clarify that was for already compromised C2, right? So they use like were those legitimate pages that they compromised and they just did redirectors on the landing page? Because it's not like WordPress.
Yeah, so the actual CNC server, we are not sure if they are compromised or if they are on by the operators. And so on the left is the actual CNC server. On the right is the website to which the CNC server redirects. On the right, these are, I'm sure, legitimate websites.
Correct, yeah.
On the left, I'm not sure.
Got it. Thanks.
So once around the 2017 period where you noticed that generally like a lot of the activity was much harder to track. So when you actually now have this news visibility on Operation Ghost, do you think there's any evidence to show that they did have any significant operational methodology changes in 2017? Or was it just the case we were looking in the wrong place?
Honestly, I was not looking at the Dukes before, so I'm not sure how people were tracking them or like why they did lose trace of the Dukes. I think this is a totally different cluster of activity that was not burned, so they continue to use it in comparison to other clusters like Cozy Dukes and things like that were reported, so they stopped using it.
I'll ask the last question, a simple but difficult one. Who do you think are they?
So we don't do attribution.
Okay, off the record.
I can explain why. Because so we mainly work with technical details, and we are not involved in anything other than analyzing malware and doing forensic or things like that. So from that perspective, it's not possible to determine with a good confidence who is behind that.
I appreciate that answer. Thank you so much. This was a fantastic talk. Thank you.